this time I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting for January 24th at the Government Center. Roll call. I am present, Mr. Barr is present, and Mr. Bellman is absent. The rest of council, the mayor, the finance director, and the clerk are all in attendance. Is there already any audience participation? I'll look. I doubt it. There's nobody. Did anybody sign up for audience participation? Jim, what did you want to talk about? Okay, we're good with that. Approval of the December 13th minutes. Mr. Barr, have you had a chance to look at the minutes or see if there's anything you'd like to correct?
I have, Mr. Fury. I have no issues with the minutes. I'd make a motion that they are approved as submitted.
I will second Mr. Barr's motion. Discussion? There is none. All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved 2-0. Permanent appropriation presentations. First on the agenda is Parks and Rec. Jennifer Betson, would you please take the stage?
Good evening, Jen.
Good evening.
Okay, we have Jen here tonight to talk about Parks and Rec, the Senior Center, and the Fitness Center.
Speak in the mic. I was telling her to speak in the mic.
Hey. Yes.
What's wrong?
They would like you to speak into the mic.
I am speaking into the mic.
Okay, then we're all good.
Okay. Okay, so we have Jen here to talk about Parks and Rec, Senior Center, and Fitness Center. We're going to start with Parks and Rec. And what we're going to go over tonight are the changes for the departments from the temporary budget to the permanent budget, and also just highlight a few of the things in the department that are going to be the bigger issues for the budget this year. So in Jen's budget for Parks and Rec, we all know that includes for special events and all the wonderful things that Parks and Rec takes care of. Jennifer, if you just want to take a brief moment and talk about the potential organizational staffing changes that we might have upcoming for this year, and this would cover both Parks and Rec and Fitness Center, that could impact the budget, not necessarily, but could.
Okay, so with the departure of Brandon Burns, we are looking to how that is going to impact the department, how we're going to make changes to it. I don't have that answer right now. So we're going to proceed forward as if everything is the way that it is. And as we have to make changes, we'll bring those to council. I just don't have those changes right now. This is all kind of very new, so the mayor and I are working on what that potentially looks like.
So as far as changes to the temporary appropriations for Parks and Rec, they are needing a copier there, and they're going to use the copier at Parks and Rec and push that down to the Fitness Center. So we're going to use the old copier still, and then they need a little bit of money for $2,000 for the printing and advertising for a proposed rebrand. And we're going to put some printing and advertising money into the Fitness Center as well. You'll see in a couple pages. Do you want to talk a little bit to the rebrand?
Basically what the rebrand is it's to bring us into one department. Right now we're two separate. We're the Fitness Center and we're Parks and Rec. We want to rebrand us and bring us all together. So the new branding is going to be Fitness, Aquatics, and Community. So that's what's going to start rolling out through this year. So that's why we want to devote some dollars to that.
Okay.
The addition for the salaries is just because we had some increases to seasonal and part-time staffing, just to be able to be competitive, and to get in our camp directors and our camp workers and all those folks. When I take a look at the budget after we close out the year, those are one of the things that we do internally in finance is we take a look at salaries, pension, and healthcare and make sure we're covered. So I needed to add a little bit of money to Parks and Rec for salaries to cover that. The last item under Parks and Rec we wanted to just briefly touch on is a possible update for the holiday display at City Hall and on the McTiernan Bridge, which would also come along with some electrical work that needs done that I think the mayor can speak to.
Yeah, we're looking to up from last year, from the budget that we had last year. And Jen, if you want to jump in, I don't want to steal your thunder. I mean, she's well aware as well, because we had a long meeting about this. But last year, I think we looked at 20,000, and this year we're looking at close, maybe between 35 and 50. Okay, so we're looking at 50. And what most of that is infrastructure, what we're doing. We're going to finish off City Hall, which we didn't finish because there was nothing on the sides at all, if you remember. It was just all the fronts. And so we're going to finish off City Hall. So it's not much decoration here. But we've never really done anything on McTarian. All we've ever had were the purple bows, okay? Mm-hmm. So we're looking to bring some power over to the bridge, or both bridges, and then be able to light up those bridges and maybe some garland on them and things like that. So that's where the additional money came in. Otherwise, we started with just 20 like we did last year. But I know that, all council, me included, we had an issue with that in years past with the decorations. But this is not just for decorations. This is for infrastructure that once we do it this year and we get that electrical over to those bridges and on McTarian, then we'll be good to go, and it'll just be decoration from there on in. Jen, you want anything?
No, that's really the bulk of this, and that is why we went from about 20 to between 35 and 50. It just depends on the electrical.
You're going to rebrand a department for $2,000?
No, that's just the portion for the Parks and Rec portion. There's more money in Fitness Center because most of the rebranding is going to be done at the Fitness Center.
Okay.
That's the part that has to be rebranded the most.
If you had to take just a ballpark guess of what it is total between the two lines, the Fitness Center and the Park and Rec, would you?
$9,200.
So for $10,000, you think you could rebrand?
Yeah.
Did you have somebody internally working on? Okay.
I do.
All good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good.
You're welcome.
Any other questions regarding Park and Recs?
Nothing.
So next up for the senior center, we have just a couple additions. They need a couple hundred extra more dollars for communications. That's just where they ended up last year on their expense. And then we are asking for $4,000 for an anniversary celebration. That Jen, if you could speak a little bit to that.
So the senior center is turning 20 years this year. Laura would like to, we've been under a remodel as well. So with this remodel in May, she wants to have a festival that just reopens the senior center, celebrates the 20th anniversary. This gives her some funds to be able to do that are outside of her operating funds that she uses for her activities and things.
Seems reasonable.
Okay.
And last for Jen, if I can get the slide to change. Can you move the slide forward for me, Mark? My clicker is not working. Thanks. So over on the fitness center side, we talked about the rebrand already. We are in discussions about our merchant services. So that's the fee that we paid when people use a credit card. And so that's a fee that online, I believe we're passing along to the customer, but we're not doing that in person. So we want to talk about that, but as we were looking into the fees, we just need to do an overlook out of all the Parks and Rec fees along with those credit card fees. So that's something that Jen and Matt and I think Shannon are going to be working on to go through and make sure that we have all of our fees updated before we bring that legislation back to council.
Do we have a cash price now versus a credit price? I mean, I know I'm just seeing that credit card transaction or processing fee passed on
Right.
in some situations. I mean, whether it's some places, I've seen it at restaurants, I've got it from vendors and suppliers, and I just wonder if that's something
We do not currently have that in place, but that's what we're looking at doing now is because we've got to pass that on somewhere.
Yeah, some of those are getting
continue to absorb that
hefty.
in-person
The
fee.
fees are getting really high.
Yeah.
What does high mean? Is it 6%, 3%?
3.
It depends on what card,
Yeah.
and it even doesn't just depend on what card you're using, like Visa, MasterCard, American Express. It also depends on what kind of Visa card you're using and what kind of MasterCard you're using. So it can range anywhere from 2 to 6, depending on
And
what
it depends on
kind
how
of
many
card.
transactions are in
Yep.
one day with that particular card. I
Yep.
mean,
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at the actual merchant service provider as well as all of our fees and if we want to pass anything along. So that's Parks and Rec and Fitness Center. And then Jen, did you want to speak to the equipment lease?
So right now we've taken the old equipment lease, approached the vendor and said we want like for like. We want to try and not change our cost So Jacob is currently working on that right now. We won't have an answer. We heard from the vendor 2 weeks ago. We won't have an answer until March on that, but we still have 2 payments left on the current equipment, and so we're still in good shape.
Okay, so then we already talked about the rebrand, so we have an additional $5,000 in printing and advertising for the fitness center. And we will talk a little bit more about the fitness center at the end when I go over the 2022 closed numbers, but you do see that we have an anticipated subsidy of $0. Last year we had a 0 subsidy year that the fitness center was, I hate to use the word profitable in a government setting, but it had a revenue stream that was higher than the expense stream.
There's a surplus.
We had a surplus. There you go. I like that word.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
So, but keeping in mind that we made those changes last year, and Jen and her team did a wonderful job of it, because we are prepping for this roof pull pack project to come to fruition, which it is going to happen sooner than later, because we are going to get to a time where otherwise we would have to make the choice to close down the pool. So we don't want to do that, so we are preparing to carry that debt service in the fitness center to be able to get that project done. So
What does the rate look like today?
What's that?
What does the rate look like today? With an AA2 credit rating, what kind of rate do we get?
You know, I'll be honest, with only $1 million of borrowing, I am not sure what rate we're gonna look at. You know, the last that we borrowed on the med units, I think we're at around a 4. So that was like a $750,000 purchase. But again, that was a different kind of asset. So with this being a building maintenance loan, I'm just not sure. We haven't looked into it just yet. Yeah.
And would you be looking for a term of 10 years, 5 years, 20?
Probably 10.
Okay.
Because we've tried to structure it that the surplus that we have at the fitness center is right around that, you know, $100,000 to $125,000 mark, which would cover the debt service. That's the goal.
In theory.
In theory.
Thank you.
In theory.
Are there any other questions regarding? Oh,
One
sorry.
more quick one. What made us go from a deficit to a surplus?
You're looking at her right there.
Yeah.
Oh, you stole my line.
Yeah.
I was about to say that.
I thought it was my
line.
advocacy for the years that I've been here.
Darn.
Yeah.
Faster.
You're blushing.
Faster.
It's being able to close the gap between the expense and the revenue. I mean, truly, we focus differently on revenue than we have in years past. Our rentals are up. We were able to utilize and charge for space that we weren't normally utilizing and charging for. It's basic. I mean, it's just was that simple.
Well, I know some like they have like the wheelchair basketball now. You mean things like that? Okay.
Yeah, we weren't open to things like that before.
Yeah.
We were simply, if the community was using it, they were using it. If they weren't, they weren't.
Yeah,
We
nice.
changed that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We ran deficits, in my mind, from the numbers I've looked at, between $250,000 and $500,000 for 10 to 12 to 15 years. And it's a really long story with all sorts of little intricacies that the mayor's still working on. So
It's unheard of, really, with recreation centers and stuff like that in any community.
but,
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
impressive.
Yeah, hats off.
but Jen's really done a nice job of
Agreed.
looking at it as a business instead of a. She looks at it as like business. Let's just put it that way. Thank you. She's doing a great job.
Well said.
Well done.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Next
Who did
on.
I have up next? Bryan?
We have Bryan.
Okay. No luck.
Good evening.
Can you move backwards to
She should've went
Bryan's
last.
page?
Jen should have went last.
You got to go backwards. There you go. Thanks, Mark.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Good evening.
Thanks, Bryan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So our revenue results for last year, I will go over again at the end of the presentation where I have our enterprise fund results for golf and fitness. But they had another good year on the revenue side of things. So how I work on the revenue budget for the golf course as I give a call over to Bryan and say, you know, what is our fee structure going to look like next year? And we have that discussion. But as always, both Bryan and I caution that our revenue, it can be based on last year, but if we have a rainy season, we can't fight the weather, right? There's no alternative revenue method if we can't get people on the course. So the revenue numbers that we have in there are based on another good year, but the past 2 years, what has it been?
Really good weather.
Really good weather, yeah.
Last two
So
seasons.
if you want to take just a moment and speak to the fee increase that you might see this year.
Yeah, we're currently working on fees right now. A lot of what we can do, obviously, we're going to raise fees no matter how much we can do. We're trying to offset some of this deficit, but it's really difficult in the situation that we have. But with all the other courses in the area and stuff, we can't outprice ourselves. So we got to be cautious of how much we go up across the board. So you're probably looking at a $1 to $2 fee increase across the board for this upcoming season. Just trying to keep up with our expenses and increases expenses. Everything we have in the golf industry right now is a challenge to keep up with.
So the main appropriation change for Bryan is actually a reduction. We had $100,000 set aside for that cart battery program that we've been running the past couple years. Bryan had a call back from his vendor just recently that we can drop that number down to $55,000.
That's great. Nice.
So it's great
Is
news
that
for.
because we got a better deal on the batteries, or?
Yeah, they've been working since last year. They had some batteries already there. We got a better deal. I wasn't sure what coming into this year what these batteries are going to cost. So I've been working with Southeast is our company we deal with. We purchased those golf carts 4 or 5 years ago already, I think. So we got a pretty good deal on that, and they take care of all that for us. They take the carts, switch out the batteries, bring them back. So we started that process last year when they just started. Once the warranty hit last year, I think it was July 1st, they just started tanking real quick. So we managed to keep up with that. I came back to you last year for a little bit of money to keep the carts going for the rest of the season. But knock on wood, everything gets taken care of before we open up, and we have nothing else to worry about with these golf carts. As far as the batteries, they've been great. Just time for get those batteries. For those who don't know, there's 6 batteries in each cart that you replaced. So it's quite a process.
And the carts have been a good investment.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So the only other thing I just wanted to mention briefly on the restaurant and banquet side of things, we will get that rental and utility income again this year. And then I believe this is the year that on their revenues, they will report into us at the end of the year where their sales were. And then there's some differences that we might see for next year. But at least we will get that dollar amount next year. But this is our last year, I believe, with the flat amount. When we were we had a meeting and looked over the contract a couple weeks ago. So we might see some changes there this year, but for this year, we're at a flat income amount. And then, as we've talked about, since we issued the bond is in the general non-payment fund, and that's where that payment comes out of. So any questions for Bryan with the pro shop?
I have a little side question.
Sure.
We had ordered shirts last year for council. Shirts, jackets.
They never. I got back to all the emails. They never got purchased. The material, the items that you guys had wanted, I responded back to. I think it was maybe Shane. I'm not sure.
Shannon was coordinating.
Yeah, unfortunately, all that stuff.
So
Getting anything in the industry right now has been tough, but I'm being told this year everything's going to be a lot better with getting merchandise in. So
Okay.
we'll have to wait and see how it goes.
So Karen, what we can do and what others are doing and I'm doing is we're buying our own shirts. We're taking them to RDP, excuse me.
That's all right.
Sue?
And they embroider things for the city.
Oh, okay.
Ted used it all the time, so they already have the logo and if you want your name on it. And I think we get $100 a year that you just get it done and turn in the receipts, and then Sarah will send you a check or payment. I mean, there's a reimbursement.
Good to know.
Well, Funny thing is, last year when the email came out to buy that stuff, I went out and bought a bunch of shirts. I didn't know what to do with it. On Sunday when the snowstorm came, I was like, I'm going to clean out all these closets. And I found the shirts.
Yeah.
I'm like, I found these shirts. I bought them for the city.
Yeah.
Never did anything with them, so that's hilarious. They
There's
just
still
brought
time.
it
This is the good time of year to get get the embroidering done because you don't need short sleeve
up.
golf shirts.
Right. I bought two
So
short sleeves and a
I
long
have
one.
two that are sitting there waiting to get done with a jacket. So I'm doing the same thing.
That's so funny.
But anyway, that's what happened with that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
And next up, we have Jim Roberts.
That is so funny.
There you go. You're ready to go.
So we have
evening.
a few increases on the golf maintenance side of things. So Jim, if you just wanted to speak to those price increases that you're seeing.
Sure. As Brian mentioned earlier, right now the supply chain issues and increased cost is still going on. So in talking with our vendors for our supplies, for our operating needs, chemicals, fertilizers, parts for our equipment, those prices continue to go up. So we did request an additional from the temporary budget, that amount of $16,800 for those categories to help offset those increased prices for those accounts.
So any questions for Jim? His budget is pretty maintained over the years, and actually his budget decreased a bit this year because he has a bit less in capital spending.
I don't have any questions for Jim. I mean, again, I think that we run the maintenance, the supplies you need pretty tight. You know, if something happens, we work it out. So I don't have any questions. I think you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, what percentage of that 16.8? What's your total budget? Like a 16.8, 2%, 3%?
It's right there on that slide. It's that 896 650
It's
number
further down.
on the bottom third of the slide.
Oh, okay, got it. Oh, so that's like 2% approximately what you're asking for.
Right.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there's just some fee and material increases and things like that Jim asked to have some more money in a few of those line items. Okay. And so thank you very much, Jim. If there's no other questions.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
the anticipated subsidy for the golf course is right there.
171.
Yep.
Is that taking into account the increase, or is that with using today's numbers?
Yeah, so overall, the golf expense budget actually goes down because Brian's $45,000 cut for his batteries covers that 16.8 that Jim needs, plus a little bit more. So the subsidy actually got reduced.
I meant, is the subsidy of 171 based off of the cart fees for 2022 or the projected cart fees of 2023? So if you raise your fees $2 on 30 or $1 on 32,000 rounds.
Yeah, it's for the projected 2023 revenues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just want to understand that.
Yep.
Okay.
And Mark, if we could flip through to the end there. There you go. Thank you. So just some quick 2022 year-end updates for you. We'll probably do a little bit more in-depth look with the pie charts and all that good stuff a little later on after we get through budget hearings. But 22, we ended very well in the general fund, and that is because we had prepared for that hit to income tax because we lost a couple of our larger employers that did not come through. So we'll see what happens after this filing season to see if any of that money goes back out the door. But for right now, at the 2022 year end, the general fund is up $3.3 million. So $2 million of that is from that income tax revenue that we did not expect to get, that we prepared for a hit that did not come. And then also we don't normally spend all of our budget. We spent about 90% of our budget last year. So between those two things, we ended very well last year in the general fund. On the full city picture, we ended up $4.5 million above where we ended the year before. About $500,000 of that came from the sewer revenue fund. We already talked about the general fund. We are building revenues in that sewer fund because we have that large project coming that kind of the same thing we did with the fitness center. We're building reserves there so that we have room to pay for that debt service that's going to be coming with that project. And we'll hear from Nate, I think, next month about where we're at on that project, because you'll probably see some legislation come in February to get going on the design part of that project. And so the other piece of the puzzle is we got the rest of the ARPA money in last year. So we have all the ARPA money in our coffers, but we just have not spent much of it just yet. We are using it to offset the costs from the road program, and then we have that safety town money set aside that Jen's mostly going to use this year, and then we're also going to use it for the Dorridge project. So all things that we've talked about the past couple years for the use of that money.
Sure. What's the ARPA? What's ARPA stand for?
Oh, sorry, it's the American Rescue Plan. So we got two just shy of $1 million payments. One came in last year and one came in the year before. And it was the second round, essentially, of COVID relief funding that came down from the federal government.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay, if you could click to the next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So there's those income tax numbers that we just kind of hit on. And then we talked about the ARPA relief funding, so you can see that there. And then last slide, Mark, if you could. So this is the enterprise funds. As we talked about last year, we did have a golf subsidy. It was $135,000. But if you look at that third bullet point, if you do revenues over expenses, the actual operational deficit was $67,000. We have to subsidy them a little bit more at the end of those winter months because they, use up the reserves from being closed all winter. So they ended up not needing quite all of it, but we don't take it back out of the fund because they will use it this year as they get through the winter. And then green fees, I just wanted to point out, green fees went up 3.1% from the previous year. So that was good. And then on the fitness center side, we had that zero subsidy, and we had a surplus of $129,000. But again, we are preparing for that debt service to come through on the roof pull-pack project. And as Jen mentioned, rental income was a big factor in that. Rental income they concentrated on, and there was a 56% increase in rental fees from the year before. So again, great job to the staff at the fitness center and Jen's team. So any questions on those basic numbers for the 2022 year end? Okay.
I don't have any, thank you.
Let me clarify. So 135 is the 2022 total subsidy. That's everything out, everything. So when someone says to me,
it does not include the debt service. Debt service does not come out of the golf fund.
Right.
What's the debt service here? Can you?
$400,000.
Right.
That's $400,000 on top of the 135, or is
yes.
it? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. The debt service is paid by the general bond payment fund.
Right.
So it comes out of a different.
Right. I just want to know that
bucket.
total number. Thank you.
Yep. I understand.
Are there any other questions? I just to clarify David's point, we're gonna put 135 in as the subsidy, but the net subsidy is really 67 when you take the revenues less expense. Is that
For
right?
last year, yeah.
Okay. All right, and we're gonna raise rates. Yeah. Brian, how many rounds did we do last year? 32. 36,000 rounds. So if we raised our fees by $1 to just overall, it's 35,000. That'll be increased.
Yeah, but all the expenses are increased too.
I agree.
So yeah, that's why we're raising them. Yeah, sure.
And there's also probably we could do a slight bump on the cart fees as well. So, yeah, we'll see.
Whatever you feel is best.
When you say 36,000 rounds, is that at 18 holes or 9 holes?
That's a combined 9 and 18.
We had 36,000 people, or 36 people teed off to start. Some of them played 9, some of them played 18.
Okay, that's.
We had 36,000 starts. I play on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. We only play 9.
So that counts as one,
Yes.
regardless if we play 9 or 18.
Yes.
You got it. Any other questions about the budgets for the department heads that we have in tonight, or those initial 2022 numbers?
I have none. Does anybody else on the committee or council have any questions?
I have nothing additional.
Next month, we have the service department, engineering and infrastructure, and the building department and wastewater. So
Could you say that again, please?
we have service, wastewater, engineering and infrastructure, building, and economic development.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. All right, so there's the 2022 financial review. Are there any comments or questions moving forward on any topics or miscellaneous?
Nothing.
I have nothing. Mayor?
I just want to make we have a guest in our audience tonight. He is, believe it or not, this young man, he's a teacher in Rexville. I thought he was a student. That's why I went over there. I thought he went to the high school, and I told him that. I don't want to embarrass you, but he lives here in Ward 1. And so I just wanted to give a shout out. Thank you for being here. He's never been to a council meeting, and he thought he'd come out and say hello. What was your name again? I'm sorry?
Jonah Fischat.
Okay.
What do you teach?
World history and psychology this year. So
What year is this for you?
this is my second year Brexville. So.
Very nice.
Thank you for letting me do that. I just wanted, because he was sitting here. I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Oh, Matt has some. Matt. Yeah, they're down at miscellaneous.
But before we adjourn tonight's public meeting and head into our subsequent meetings, I would like to ask that we go into an executive session for the purpose of considering the compensation of a public employee and also review negotiations with public employees concerning their compensation terms and conditions of employment.
Okay. This time I'd like to make a motion that we add an executive session to our agenda for the purposes the law director stated. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. We have a second motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The 2 board members have voted in the affirmative. We're in executive session. We'll report back out when we're done with the session.
Do we need to add
Sorry, go ahead.
people in? Never mind, go ahead.
I would roll call all of the members that are present here, Mr. Fury, for this executive.
Even though they're not on the
They might not be on the committee, but
not a problem.
the members of council that are present at this meeting, I would ask that they all be full.
I can do that. We have a motion on the floor for an executive meeting. Jeff? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Barr? Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Post.
David?
Mr. Post, yes.
Mrs. Labby?
Yes.
A long day.
It's been a long day.
So we've passed the executive session. Thank you.
6-0.
The next meeting will be February 28th on 6 p.m. And at this time, we're adjourned to executive session. I'll report back when we return. Thank you.